It's Friday and we made it. First and foremost, we can't do this event without our sponsors. And not too many events do you have like the cocktail hour go until 7:30 at night. So thank you, JP Morgan Chase, for sponsoring that, and every other sponsor that's been here. They subsidize every single ticket. We lose money on this every single year, which I think is going to be a good idea someday, but you know, it's a work in progress right now. But without the sponsors, we couldn't pull this off. I'm really excited to bring up Ben Metz, but I have to give a little backstory about this gentleman before he comes up. So I think I have like three friends that I have been like the people I've gotten to live life with, and Ben's one of them. Ben and I normally, when we're stuck on an airplane, which is kind of every week for the last decade of our lives, one of us will be stuck one place or the other, and sometimes we literally run into each other at an airport, but other times we just get to hang out on the phone, and he'll have a glass of wine and I'll have a glass of wine, and we unpack kind of all these different things that we're dealing with in our careers and ideas about how to build the future. And it's really special for me to have somebody, you know, in my circle that I can trust, you know, the good and the bad of everything that I'm building. And so I'm so proud to call him a friend. I'm so proud to get to live life with him. But I'm really excited to watch by the way, everybody got their slides in on time except my friend. And when he did, there's 98 of them. So, hold on to your hat because this is going to be crazy. Please help me introducing my friend, the CTO of Jack Henry, and it's no longer Associates, CTO of Jack Henry, Mr. Ben Metz.
I fucking love this guy. It's really good to be with you all. Really appreciate the opportunity, Wade. I feel the same. So Wade and I are very similar. We have very few friends. And he just happens to be one of my friends. This talk I'm going to do today, I actually did it in Florida a while back, and he asked me to come do it here with you all. So that audience was a little different. That audience was not technical at all. So I'm looking forward to kind of working my way through these slides with a technical audience. So that's super exciting. Really just appreciate the opportunity, Wade. I guess it's a big deal for me. I really love this conference. I think it's such a big deal. And you know, we brought a crew this year. We'll bring a bigger crew next year. It's such an important thing. So my talk's called Down the Stack. What I mean by that is like something really simple. All US dollars settle on IBM machines. I'll just let that sink in. All US dollars settle and clear on IBM machines. Okay, how many of you all run IBM machines? Yeah, I'm the only one in the room. Okay, so like we have to talk about like financial services down the stack, and down the stack is where all the innovation is. That's where sort of everything that's left to do is. It's also where all the money's at, all right? Couple quick things about me. CTO Jack Henry. I'm happiest when my GitHub is green, so you can see how happy I am if you come to my check, okay. So been at Jack Henry 9 years. Jack Henry bought Banno. Wade and I built Banno together. There's a bunch of folks here that helped build that, and a bunch of us stayed at Jack Henry, and we are effectively like a startup running inside the company. I still run that business inside the company as well as being the CTO. It's the fastest growing business inside the company, and so now what we're doing is we're building a new core system. I made myself some notes, and I have to make sure I bring them up. Trust me, we're gonna get going pretty fast here. Yeah, I like building things, so I'm a musician. I work with a really cool company called Built, and we built guitars. I build cool, new, weird guitars every year. Super cool company, so if you're a musician, you should check them out. They're super cool. Also, I'm a painter, so I'm an artist, and I had to pull an old Wade and Ben picture out of the archives. So this is Wade and I actually launching Vano at Finovate. The funny thing about this picture is like the thing I was thinking about when I put this picture in this deck was like how little I knew at this point in time. I'm sure Wade feels the same way. And how much I was gonna get my ass kicked by financial services in the next decade. So anyway, we're just gonna head quickly into this talk. The United States is not a better place without our community financial institutions, and that's what we're up to at Jack Henry. So we'll talk a little bit about Jack Henry in a minute, but what we really care about is community financial institutions. The choice of financial institutions in the US is something that we have that's a privilege that the rest of the world doesn't have. Okay, so let's let that sink in. So that's what I care about. That's why I'm at Jack Henry. Jack Henry has an outsized opportunity to help them compete. Part of the reason why I'm happy to be here with you all is that I think some of you all can also come work with us to help them compete. Does that make sense? You know, we're working really hard inside this company to make things better for developers so that you all can innovate on their behalf. This is what they do. This is that same street corner in Cedar Falls where I live. It just so happens that this is also our office. So I'm just gonna kind of like go back and forth. That's what community financial institutions do. They take street corners like that and they make them look like that, okay? Big banks don't do that because big banks don't call these people back, okay? We love big banks. I actually think it's really important that we have a big bank ecosystem that's coupled with a large ecosystem of smaller financial institutions. That also makes for a very, very healthy economy and a healthy sort of GDP, if you will. So this is downtown Cedar Falls, like, you know, and I love the fact that Wells Fargo used to be here, and now I'm there. It's great. So what we're up to at Jack Henry is we're building a new core system from the ground up, and I'll explain a few details about that as I go. A couple things about Jack Henry. We service about roughly 1,800 financial institutions in the US. That would be us basically providing core processing systems to those customers. So we do represent a network, okay, and a large distribution channel. We also have, roughly speaking, about 7,000 or 8,000 customers that use a proliferation of our products. This is a really important book. This used to be like, you know, a super popular book in Silicon Valley. I don't know, it's kind of fell out of fashion. I'm trying to bring it back. I think this is actually way more important a book now than it was 15 to 20 years ago. This is a book by Carlota Perez. A couple of things about this book that I'm gonna kind of use and drill into today is that technological, like we're in hype curves, right? I think my goal is to not use any AI acronyms for this talk. So we're in all these hype cycles and hype curves, and that's all really important. Like what's happening in AI is super important, but what's really important is how these things converge. And when things converge, things change, and when things converge and then the developer landscape changes, then you get new companies. So what I'm gonna do in this first part of this talk is kind of slam through what I think is convergence, all right? As a convergence of a lot of different things that are gonna have an outsized impact on, say, the next 5 to 7 years, and then my lens is for financial services, and the rest of that lens is focused on how do we help community financial institutions compete, all right? Lots of cool things about this book, but you all should read it. I think every engineer in the world should read this, and especially if you're working in financial services, you should read it. My next favorite book is Thinking in Bets. This is Annie Duke. If you don't understand what's happening in the world, it's really pretty hard to make a bet. And you're building a company and you decide to use a programming language, that's a bet. You decide to pick a cloud provider, that's a bet. You come pick a distribution channel, you want to do business with Jack Henry, that's a bet, right? If you're funding companies, it's pretty easy to think in bets if you're funding companies. It's a little more difficult when you're technical because those things are bets. You can make bets as a technical leader that are either going to win or lose, okay? And that's pretty important. So I like to think in long-term games. So I love long-term ideas and long-term games. So I think it's really important that if you understand how things are going to converge, then you'll be able to think long-term and you'll be able to play a longer-term game. The reason why I like longer-term games is sort of simple. Nobody fucking plays them. So the field is really small if you go find a long-term game. So what I did here, and I'm going to walk you through this. This is a constellation of kind of everything that I think about and read about to try to understand the future. A big part of my job at Jack Henry is the future, and trying to figure out how I help Jack Henry get there, and then how we help developers. So really, my lens is really about that. I'm not trying to be exactly correct. Basically, I want to be roughly right versus precisely wrong. I think that's John Maynard Keynes. This is just kind of a drawing that was in my iPad, and I just pulled it out and turned it into a presentation, all right? So I like also to think in questions. So I'm not trying to give you, I hope that you, as you kind of walk through this with me, that you'll also think in questions. So I'm not actually going to try to drive anything specific, although I'm going to, try to give you a couple predictions. So first of all, how many people are not in the cloud? Right. All of financial services settles and clears on machines that are not in the cloud. Okay, so that's weird. Y'all are in the cloud. When I got to Jack Henry, I was informed that I had to get out of the cloud. Wade and I were. That's a long story, which we don't have time to talk about. So the reason for that is these IBM machines, which we're going to talk a bunch about today. But interesting fact about IBM, what's happening at IBM, and just hopefully this comes across, but I'm just hoping to be useful to you all today. All right, so I'm going to try to provide some useful information. Jack Henry's the largest purchaser, I think, the largest purchaser of power systems in the US for sure, if not the world. So we got a lot of these machines. I spent a bunch of time at IBM, and it turns out like they now ship with Red Hat on every machine. They also ship with Kubernetes. That's really important for you all to know. All right. And now I met with the CTO of this particular group that's focused on Red Hat on these power systems, and he said, we guarantee that any software you want to run will work. All right, you'll understand why this is important in a minute, but they also have a Terraform provider. They're also running these things in the cloud. And here's a fun fact, so everybody's talking about NVIDIA and GPUs. It's really funny, we've kind of done this full circle back to supercomputers, right? So we're like, supercomputers, well, IBM's been building supercomputers for like a really long time. All of financial services runs on supercomputers. All right, so the next thing about the cloud that I think is interesting for financial services is CI/CD, obviously, but we actually add some acronyms for that in terms of what we're doing, which we call continuous security, continuous audit, or compliance. A really fun fact, you can now build a system in the cloud in which no humans touch it. All right, so my basic premise is really simple. The regulators are going to prefer this. Quick fact about Jack Henry, we are 2x more regulated than a large bank. So I'm kind of turning into the old guy who's super cranky when I talk to people about regulation. We just finished a very large exam inside the company. Basically, every acronym in Washington is on site at Jack Henry at almost every day of the year. And by the way, that's totally appropriate. And we have great regulators, and I appreciate that. If you don't like regulation, there's a lot of countries you can go visit that don't have it. Go there and try to start a business. Okay, then come back and tell me how that goes. And then tell me you don't like regulation. Regulation is super important, but it's super hard, and it slows things down. But one thing I'm here to say for sure is that regulators are going to prefer cloud because of the ability to remove humans. So I always ask when I'm with the regulators, I like to joke with them, like, why are you here? Why are you here to talk to us? Are you here because of the software, or are you here because of the humans? And they laugh, and I'm like, yeah, you're here because of the humans. Okay, so what this represents is an ability to remove humans. You can solve most of compliance, audit, and security in a CI/CD pipeline, right? You can. And so now I think it's possible to build a platform in which we can basically not have any humans. Now, I'm going to skip through some things. Hopefully you've read these papers, the hardware lottery. It's really important to understand that, I think all of you know this, so I'm going to skip through this slide pretty quickly. But this is actually, to me, what's interesting. And I, like all of this, like if you take in like all of the Twitter or now X and LinkedIn word salad, and you try to figure out what that actually means for financial services, couple things. I think we're in a very specific time. How many of you were around for Web 2.0 and the advent of things like PHP, Ruby, et cetera, where the tooling changed? Okay. How many of you were around for that? How many of you learned those things? Yeah. When the tooling for developers changes, you get new companies, and you get them faster, okay? You get them a lot faster. And what's really happening in this convergent sort of situation is the access for developers in these tools is the bar for that is coming down, and it's coming down wickedly, wickedly fast. For us, what we want to do inside the company is we want to teach it. So we're going to teach everybody how to program with data and neural networks. It's just another tool now in the toolbox, all right? I like to reference this. I'm a big believer in what Andre pushed out a few years back, which was software 2.0, okay? That's a new way of thinking about developing software. So we're actually serious internally about applying those ideas to building financial services and building down the stack. And for those of you who may not understand, and he said this in a public interview, when he got to Tesla and was working on full self-driving, there was one neural network running in the car. When he left, there was 1,000. I think Elon tweeted that full self-driving version 12 is 99% neural networks, okay? So that's what software 2.0 is. I think software 2.0 is going to be a really big deal for financial services, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So the barrier to the tooling is actually coming down, and I think if and not just that, I think the barrier to learning programming, generally speaking, is also coming down. So you actually, that's a really important thing. So we're going to get a lot more developers in the ecosystem. So for what we're doing, we're building a software 2.0 core system. Couple of things why that would matter to you all. This is something we're releasing this quarter. We're building basically a data broker. And so there's been this huge evolution inside financial services, everybody building APIs, yada, 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 and we're doing that too. We have a lot of aspirational ambition to be a really great API platform for you all. But we're also going to be a great data broker. So we want to actually broker data that's not been available to startups that is sitting at our financial institutions and make that available. We think there's an army of startups coming for data. And we are partnering with Google to do this because we really like the tool set in GCP. So we signed a pretty big Google deal last year, big fan of GCP and everything that's happening there. But effectively, what we want to do is enable startups to come in and work on behalf of our financial institutions. The next thing is probably Captain Obvious to everybody, but I always feel like I have to point it out, especially if I'm talking to a bank or a credit union. Every time network speeds increase or improve and you get expansion of the network, you get more demand for financial services via these devices, right? And then what happens is the software changes. So software architecture changes every time this stuff happens. If you go use any sort of financial services on your device or your phone, it's slow as shit, okay? All the big banks are slow. It's that the user experiences are terrible, and the reason for that is that people haven't actually fixed the underlying software, way, way, way down the stack. But as network speeds increase, this is only going to exacerbate the problem. It's going to just create more problems. I call it a red pipe problem. In addition to that, the advent of edge AI, we don't have time to talk about that, but edge AI is going to be really, really important, okay? Super, super important. And then what we're all going to get is new computers. Now, it's been a while. How many of you were around when we got new computers in the 80s and 90s? We really don't have new computers since then, but we're getting new computers now. And I think people aren't quite connected to that sort of simple fact. I love this dude, Jim Keller. How many know who Jim Keller is? So he's one of the few people who worked for Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, and he's built a bunch of computers. He was the co-designer and co-writer of the x86 architecture. So I follow people like this, and I like to figure out where they are. He's now building a company called TensTorrent. He's one of hundreds of people building new computers. You might say, well, Ben, why does that matter? We're going to get new computers, we're going to get new compilers, and we're going to get new programming languages. Okay, I'll let that sink in. And that's going to happen wickedly, wickedly, wickedly fast. And so then, by the way, those two gentlemen, Andre and Jim, worked together at Tesla. So Jim built the computer in the Tesla. Andre was building the full self-driving system. And then if you kind of follow them in their path, you kind of understand what's happening. We're going to move really quickly through the rest of this. This is, nobody wants to talk about cryptographic monetary networks anymore. So I speak a lot. One of the things that's really funny is they'll tell me, hey, Ben, we don't want you to talk about crypto, so what do you think I'm going to talk about? Yeah. Yeah, because we have to stop buying tops and selling bottoms, in this industry. It's super stupid. You gotta start buying bottoms. And there's a lot of interesting things that are going to happen here. Well, of course, we had to deal with this dude. If you don't think you want a regulated world, I don't know, just stare at this picture for a while. I'll just let this sort of sink in. All right, anybody here wants some regulation? Okay. It's funny, Jackson Hole's happening today. Price of Bitcoin is either going to go up or go down. I love to tell jokes about our Fed chair making the price of Bitcoin go up. Sorry, bad joke. Anyway, and the reality is, there's a couple things that are happening here that I think are important. We're going to get new FASB rules likely next year. It's a really important thing. What that means is that how Bitcoin specifically, we're going to get new FASB rules for Bitcoin specifically, and I'll let you look this up. You can kind of follow this. That the accounting rules will change. So if you're keeping track of SpaceX riding down their Bitcoin position over the last few weeks, it was kind of raging through the news. Them having to do that next year will change. Okay, and if that changes, then you're going to see more corporates holding Bitcoin on their balance sheet. We also have the halvening inbound April, May, sometime next year, and then we're going to all go through this same stupid cycle we went through before. Okay, and then I'll be back at FinTech DevCon next year, and now we can talk about crypto again. Okay, that's dumb. But what I think is most interesting, and I was spending some time talking about it last night, is I think we're going to live in a very hybrid world in financial services. Very, very, very hybrid world. For a very, very long time, like the next decade, all right? So there's a lot to discuss there, but we're gonna move on. This is y'all, this is what y'all are doing. So y'all are printing and pushing innovation, right? Every week, every day, super cool. And FinTech is hammering into this ecosystem, and it's amazing. And then the last piece is all the fiat infrastructure, I think, is gonna get rebuilt over the next 5 to 7 to 10 years. Just depends on the scale and scope of the infrastructure. And then that really means that the development landscape in financial services is going to change. Does that make sense? Okay. What are the most important problems in your field? Why aren't you working on them? This is a question I just keep in my mind and I have in my notebooks, and I spend a lot of time sitting in a chair on a farm in Iowa and thinking early in the morning, drinking coffee. By the way, if you're running a company and you're not doing that, you're doing it wrong. Get up in the morning and think. It's probably one of the most important things for you to do. Anyway, side note. But what are the most important problems in the field, and why aren't you working on them? That was a question that Richard Hamming asked. So there's some gorillas, there's some problems, and I don't have enough time in this talk to go through this part because this is kind of our world, but we are part of an oligopoly. So Jack Henry's a part of an oligopoly, Fiserv, FIS, and Jack Henry. So we are what's called the core providers. There's a bunch more, but it's kind of a long tail. And then we have the regulators, all right? So the regulatory environment creates a lot of constraint. And then we have consultants that create more constraint, and then our customers create constraint. Because effectively banks and credit unions, and I mean the big ones and the small ones, have all just stuck their head in the sand and acted like the internet didn't exist, okay? And now all that's gonna change. And now we have this fintech startup ecosystem like you all coming in and doing a lot of cool shit. So what happens for us is we gotta change. Now the hard part for us is that we go start, for example, we start moving our workloads to the cloud, and now all of a sudden we have much more extended range engagement with the regulators, and they're much more concerned, right? The consultants don't really want to hear about it, right? Because they're focused on the past. They want our customers to take a snapshot of the exact, okay, so some of you who are way down the stack are going to experience this, but some of you are not, and that is what I call just the feature war. Put all your features in a spreadsheet and compare it to the other product they're thinking about buying, right? And for those of you who work down the stack and are starting to build new stuff, you're just going to be in a massive Sahara desert for as far as you can see. Oh, you don't have that feature? Sorry. Like over and over and over again. And that's really created by consultants and customers, all right? I could spend an hour talking about this, but we're going to move on. We're really bad at the future in financial services, like we're super bad. And we have to get better. The big thing is and that really needs to start, like in my mind, it needs to start with developers. I have a lot of jokes about how we treat developers in financial services, but this is basically how we treat you all. There's other jokes I've made, and I've been told by the folks at Jack Henry I can't use those jokes. But we're really hard on developers. And it's actually this ecosystem that makes it really hard, all right? And we could spend too much time talking about that. But so basically, what we're trying to do at Jack Henry is get a lot better. Now, when I got to Jack Henry 9 years ago, when Wade and I showed up, and a bunch of you all that were in the room showed up as well, these were the tools we had at Jack Henry. These are the only tools that were legal to be able to be used. This was, roughly speaking, just a snapshot of some of our tools and stock that we were using, all right? So we were a hyper-modern, you could say, bleeding-edge group of engineers. Not only weren't these tools at Jack Henry, they were outlawed by policy. You weren't allowed to use them. And I see somebody nodding, and I know where he used to work. Am I wrong, Joel? No. Are they outlawed at that place that you were at too? Yeah. So like, this is the problem that we have. Here's what's really cool about Jack Henry. They're not outlawed anymore. Real talk. It wasn't that long ago that in this company that Docker wasn't allowed to run on a development machine at Jack Henry. So we're fixing that. And big shout out to Dave Foss, our CEO. A big shout out to Greg Adelson, our Chief Operating Officer and President. What I'm doing inside the company and what our team is doing is not possible without them getting in and working to fix this. Because when we work to fix it, we also have to work, it's really hard because we have to go work with regulators to change these things, okay? It's excruciatingly hard and it takes years, all right? So as we kind of fix this inside the company, then we're also, because there's how many of y'all have heard of Conway's Law? Conway's Law? Okay, the design of an organization creates the design of the system that it makes. Okay, that's my version of Conway's Law. And that's really important in financial services. I wish I could do, maybe next year I'll submit a talk and talk about organizational design and organizational theory. How you structure compliance, security, and audit as you scale your company is gonna have a direct impact on your ability to innovate in the future. And it's gonna create, it has the ability, if you don't get that right, that will end up in the design of your software, and that'll end up in the user experience that your customers, that the ultimate end consumers actually end up having. Does that make sense? All right? And that is fundamentally true about any company. It's a law. And it's shockingly, it actually is shockingly unbreakable. So how you structure your organization is a really big deal. So a lot of what we're doing inside the company, not possible without a complete reorganization and structural change, which is happening under Dave and Greg. So big shout out to them. And there's a bunch of other leaders in Jack Henry too that are working really hard on that. So we're working on changing all the infrastructure, but you might say, well, Ben, that's good for you, but what about us? Be really careful where you put compliance, audit, and security in your org. Be really careful. All right. So I'm gonna cruise through this really fast. I hate this. This is just a rant. I hate the word digital. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at Jack Henry. I don't even know what that means. They gave me a title. I just thought of a joke that I can't say on a live stream. Anyway, this is like a question. I run through this with banks and credit unions and other industry experts. This is a great book, by the way. It's a good coffee table book if you don't have it. There was a photographer that followed Steve around through the 80s. Took a bunch of pictures, super cool. But this is like the digital revolution in Silicon Valley from 85 to 2000. So the digital revolution evidently happened 23 years ago. So why do I have a Chief Digital Officer title? Super weird. Okay, so what I really, this is one of my favorite pictures in that book. He's making a list of the things that are still analog and or digital in the next computer, right? This is what he was doing next. So what that means in our industry, here's Ben's interpretation. It really just means demand for self-service via the internet, right? And I'm going to kind of walk you through why this is a problem. This really starts in '94. It kind of runs to here. When Wade and I started building Banno, on average, mobile users inside a financial institution were roughly 30 to 40% mobile users. Today, 80% of our platform is, roughly speaking, 80% is mobile. Okay, so that's what this curve is. So when I'm meeting with a bank board or a group of executives, what I say is, are you willing to bet me? And I love to carry cash around, so I pull out a big wad of cash, and I'm like, I will bet you $5,000 that the demand for self-service from the internet does not go down this year. And nobody takes the bet. And then I say, what about next year? What about next year? Okay, what about the year after that? Is anybody willing to bet me that demand for self-service via the internet goes down? And then they're all kind of going, oh, nobody wants to take the bet, all right? Nobody wants to take it. And I'll bet you in Bitcoin, all right? Anybody want to bet? Okay, so really what happens is it kind of merges with the growth curve of the financial institution. So evidently, in our industry, digital just means internet. Okay, I'm getting laughs from the Fiserv folks over here. Anyway, quick story from, these are quick stories, but some things sort of from the field. I meet with banks and credit unions every week. There's a CEO of a large bank we were meeting with, and he said that he had just turned over the bank to his CTO. So the operational side of the bank to his CTO. And he said, you know, Ben, in the early days of, you know, like say back 50s and 60s, it used to be you had to be a commercial lender or whatever to become CEO of a bank. And then that kind of transition where you needed to be CFO, okay? So you need to be, you know, CFO of the bank, and then you became CEO, and that was the path to CEO. And he said, I think it's going to change, and I think it's going to be technical people that are going to be running the banks. As a really interesting thing for him to say, but my advice to you as developers is to learn finance, okay? It's really important. You should really understand finance because that's your ultimate constraint. Read Technological Revolutions in Financial Capital and then frickin' learn finance. If you do that, you know, I think my brother actually works at J&J, Johnson & Johnson, and like that CEO went and got a computer science degree. There's actually degrees kicking up now where, you know, executives are, instead of going and getting an MBA, they're actually going and learning how computers work, right? So it's really important, but my message to developers is that you should learn how finance works. It's not hard. Like it really is. Okay, so how many of y'all have learned new programming languages in the last 5 years? Learning finance is easier. Okay, all right. Oh, just another story from a CIO. Well, we're gonna have to skip it. So in our world, people separate the internet from core systems. So there's always, well, digital, and they really mean online banking systems, and then legacy core systems. We built this thing called Banno. It has about 10 million users, runs on about 4,000 containers today in Azure. We're moving that to GCP. We're in the middle of moving to GCP. We are on our 4th cloud move. It's not something I consider to be that fun, but evidently we've gotten pretty good at it. So yeah, everything for us moves to GCP. And so what we're kind of doing here is kind of flattening out some of these ideas. On the left, that's kind of what everybody has done. So this is what Wade and I were doing. Like this is what Wade and I were doing on that stage. We were building a mobile application that connected to this crazy thing, and it's like a problem, right? And then like in the middle is kind of what the industry's doing now. Everybody's building a sidecore. Everybody's like, well, we'll build a retail deposit only sidecore. Like that's what Thought Machine and those folks are doing, okay? And what we're saying at Jack Henry is like, that's a problem because this thing can't run your bank. And it won't be able to run your bank for 5 to 7, maybe 7 to 10 years. And I'll explain why in a minute. But this thing can. So Jack Henry makes software, and you can complain about it, but our stuff can run a bank. So this is kind of what we're building. In the meantime, we aspirationally want to be as good as Stripe at the API layer. So this is jackhenry.dev. In our little world, we are the only ones that provide real-time sign-up to get API credentials. When you get API credentials to the stack, you have the full stack all the way down to the actual core system, all right? So we're trying to be better. We still have a long ways to go. A bunch of the team that runs that is here. But you should check it out. We're also trying to reduce what I call toll booths. So a lot of our industry creates toll booths for developers. We're trying to get rid of all those. I'm going to skip that now. I'm a little sheepish about this, but obviously good friends with Wade, and so when they raised money with A16Z, I read the article, sort of the thesis on Moov. And I thought, oh man, this is not quite correct. And I'm not trying to disagree with A16Z. So what I did is I did this on my iPad, but I kind of reworked like that, so past, present, future. So basically, it's past is proprietary software, that kind of stack. And today we have banking as a service, proprietary software, and what we're saying is the future is primitives as a service, which, by the way, I agree with the future. It's just that today is not accurate because today the future still settles on the past, and that's not going to change. Okay? If you don't believe what I'm saying, just ask Wade. Or ask me, or ask people who work down the stack, because you're still going to settle and clear on systems that were built before the internet. All right? And that's going to be true for a really, really long time. Okay? Get the right button moving here. So what that means is we effectively end up building a race car that runs on a dirt road. My favorite story is like when Wade Moov was just an idea, and he was coming out to talk to me, and I live on a farm on a dirt road, and he was driving his Porsche. And I got to watch him for 15 minutes drive 5 miles an hour up my dirt road. And I was laughing because I'm like, this is basically gonna be Moov, So, but this is funny, but I'm trying to get a point across. By the way, this is what we're doing inside Jack Henry. We're building a race car that runs on a dirt road. All right, and my team's nodding their heads. All right, like I lost count of the amount of circuit breaking we have had to build into our platform. One of our problems is we're building circuit breakers on top of circuit breakers on top of circuit breakers. All right, so that creates a dirt road. I don't know if you've ever tried to drive a fast car on a dirt road, but I wouldn't recommend it. Anyway, so all US dollars settle on systems that were built before the internet, and there's a lot of problems here. These systems are all monolithic, they're all single tenant. They scale up because they're supercomputers. So they're still relying on scaling up. And IBM actually is really good at scaling stuff up. It's really shocking. They just keep releasing bigger and better supercomputers. Old languages in tech, old languages is not the problem. Like RPG, COBOL, PL1, those are not the problem. It's the methodology that's the problem, okay? So what you all get to enjoy is modern software methodology. That doesn't exist for these systems. There's a lot of systems that run on these machines that aren't even under version control, okay? So if some of you are old enough to know when you first saw Git, all right? Say, like, it's crazy. So these underlying systems, now you might say, well, okay, well, we're going to build new modern stuff, and we're going to get to why that's a problem in a minute. There's an insane amount of features. They're highly vertically customized, and there is a lot of knobs. And banking is a Sahara desert of edge cases for as far as you can fucking see, okay? It's a Sahara desert of edge cases. So one of the coolest things about Moov and the open source side of Moov is that they're helping solve the Sahara desert use cases. Okay, it's really a big deal. And there's a long road of this is literally what it looks like. And to give you an example of the knobs, one of our core systems, we have 4. One of our core systems has 3,600 account types for deposits, just deposits. Those account types can be combined at will by the bank or credit union. So that's the math for the amount of account types available. Okay? So that's why it's like I'm the old guy in the room that's just barking at fintechs that have like 5 account types, like in their little system that they built. It's, this is a problem. You have to go solve it. So the other thing is SLAs. Now the SLA problem on these machines is really weird. So like a lot of people that have built these monolithic supercomputers and run them, and banks that just run them themselves, they run them on-prem. We still have 40% of our banks and credit unions run on-prem. Okay? We run about $1 trillion in our own data centers for them on these machines. SLAs generally for the industry for these things are about 95, in 1994 were 95%. They've improved to 99.5, okay? So that's the improvement. Now, The networks, like the payment networks, for those of you who understand the payment networks, one of the problems that with them in the cloud is that they don't understand how you could ever build what they have to do in the cloud because of the SLAs in the cloud. So like the best you're going to get on a database in any cloud is 5 nines, and that's not going to be good enough for them. Do you see? So that's not good enough for Visa or MasterCard. So there's this weird SLA problem, all right? I don't have enough time to talk about that because we're going to slam through the rest of this really quickly. Everybody's talking about faster payments, RTP, FedNow. Anybody? Right. This is like a huge problem. Everybody's going to turn on receive, and nobody's going to turn on send in these digital experiences. So the payments people, these people know what I'm saying. They're not going to turn on send. Does anybody know why they're not going to turn on send? Yeah, that's right. I hear somebody yelling fraud. Yeah, fraud. Faster payments just mean faster fraud. Okay? It's a really weird fact. ACH warehouses and wire rooms were built to slow money down. Okay? Why do we have wire rooms and ACH warehouses? Anybody building that kind of stuff in here? Yeah. Like, why? To slow money down. And now we're going to speed it up. Okay? Real fun fact. You might say, well, why can't the big banks like stop this fraud? They price it. They don't care. They price it. You can, like, we can talk about that later, but they price it. I was sitting with some big banks in the basement of a really nice New York restaurant talking to all these big banks, C-level folks. I was really fortunate to be invited to such a meeting. And they kept telling me, they're like, Ben, we just price fraud. They acted like I was just a stupid little kindergartner talking to them about fraud. And I said, good for you. Good for you. That's great. That's great. We can't. And our customers can't. I talked to a customer who had lost $600,000 in a single month. They were averaging about that in a single month. All right? So this is a huge problem. We think we can solve it, but it's shocking. So this is the other thing. Like everybody likes to talk about FedNow, and RTP, and like, what about SFTP? Nobody walks around with an SFTP T-shirt. Yeah, you should look at Moov's library. See, again, Moov understands this because this is actually the big rail. SFTP is the rail. A shocking amount of money moves over SFTP every single day in this country, and it will shock you. I'm fortunate to run the treasury business at Jack Henry, and you would not believe. So we have a customer whose customer is Boeing, okay? So we understand this, like the actual place that large amounts of money move is over ACH and wire through these channels. So these things have to be rebuilt, okay? And they have to be built with machine learning and AI in mind. All right? And that's a big part of what we're up to. Skipping through some of that, we've already talked about that. So this is kind of the evolution. I got 9 minutes, and we're going to make it through all these slides. People doubted me. I don't know. Anyway. So we built, like I said, we built Banno. We built this like digital platform. Again, I don't like the word, but we built this thing that runs on the internet. And one of my big complaints and contentions with, where we live in the industry is like people just don't like to think about like living on the other side of port 443. Some of my team knows like I'm just buying port 443 t-shirts for everybody, letting everybody know that we're going to run on the other side of port 443. All of it has to run on the other side. Now the problem is when you say that and you sit down with regulators and you go, we're going to run our back office on the internet. Chad Killingsworth, our head of engineering, was in that room with me, and the regulator was like, you can't do that. And I said, yes, we can, and here's how. And we explained, we talked for 3 hours, and he finally says, nope, we're not going to let you do that. And to his credit, I give that gentleman a lot of credit if he ends up watching this. By the way, the regulators watch my videos online, so I'm a little, by the way, y'all are amazing. We have the best regulators in the world. I'm serious. I really am serious. This gentleman's going to know what I'm talking about. Anyway, he looked at me and I just said, hey, I can't say his name, but I was just like, if we can't figure this out, if we can't figure the internet out for our customers, like they're going to lose. And they're not just going to lose a little bit. And the country's not going to be a better place if our community financial institutions lose. And you know what? To his credit, I'm getting him a ton of credit. He goes, "You're right. We have to figure this out." We went back to the drawing board. So now all of our back office all of our back office applications that we build and write all run on the internet now. Okay. If some of you might just be looking at, what is he talking about? Well, just go to a bank, take a look. All right. The other pernicious problem, I skipped by it. Yeah, so if you look at this experience here, these systems down here, the actual problem is in the design of this system. This is designed for this user that you can barely see. That's the teller. So there's a teller designed system. It was designed for that user and then bankers behind over here in this office. It was never designed for this person. So there's a hidden UX. There's all kinds of problems. There's no uptime. Why? Because it was designed for this person. And then what we've tried to do in this industry is basically take this and move it over to this, and it just doesn't work, right? So the design of the system actually has to be completely overhauled. I just keep bringing this slide up so y'all can see it. I'm going backwards, that's why. Okay, so this is us. This is what we're doing. So we're taking this digital platform that we built. What we're saying is basically it all is going to run on the internet, right? And this is just kind of me animating that through. Now we have a couple of really interesting ideas, which I don't have time to quite go into because there's a few things I want to hit before I'm done. But there's a couple ways to think about what we're building. One is if you know how the card networks work, and you know that there's a suspense account that runs on the card networks, right? Moov knows this, and some of you know this. You can think of what we're building as a suspense account for all rails, and then we're ultimately going to settle on the old system, okay, for now. So that means all transactions, this is all being built on Google Cloud. We've just released our first wave of services. A couple of things that might be important for you to know. As we release these things, the day those APIs become available for us internally, they're made available at jackhenry.dev for you all. That's a rule now inside the company. We got a lot of try hard in us. If those of you who go look at our documentation, you might complain about it. You might give us a poor grade. We're trying real hard, all right? We aspirationally want to be as good as companies like Moov or Stripe, all right? But we're getting there. It takes us a bit. So effectively, everything is going to pre-process through this layer. This is just an example of how that might work. Also an example of how AI will work in the system, all right? We have a lot of data. That means we can build a lot of intricate and interesting narrow surgical models, okay? And then we think we can process and deal with fraud in real time, okay? On any rail, okay? Turns out that every single payment has to do one thing before it actually leaves the financial institution. You have to check balance. And there's these two weird systems called transaction processing and exception item processing. So we're rebuilding all those things. I'm going to skip through a few of these things, and then as we rebuild them, as you can see in these architecture diagrams, we're overhauling. This system is still going to be here, but we're just actually getting all the data off of it so that we can make it available to you all. So you can see we're building our treasury application on top of this new data stack. The same is going to be then made available for startups, okay? And the first leg of this release will be this fall. Now, hopefully you can understand that what we're doing is super hard. It's like crazy hard, especially with the regulators and with our security and internal compliance and audit teams and our legal teams. It's incredibly difficult, but we're pretty optimistic we're going to be able to do this. So we want to be a leader here. So back to this and back to developers, I kind of want to wind up this talk here with this and sort of back to, I really think we are in a Web 2.0 type time period for developers. This is like my favorite meme I've seen, hard to swallow pills. I'll let you read that. If you think AI will replace you as a programmer, maybe you're not a good programmer. Now this is a funny meme, right? It's super funny, and I laughed, but it's really true. Here's some fun, some interesting things about how these things are trained. I think you all are smart enough to know how these things are trained. They're trained on open source software. Okay, so hardened production grade software is a different thing. It's a different, there's a saying that a difference in size is a difference in kind. Okay, so ChatGPT is not going to give you hardened production software. Now, maybe they get there. Maybe companies like Google and others can, and we'll see. But right now, it's not there. But the interesting thing to me is that it's now going to be way easier to learn how to program. And then developers that adopt these tools and get really serious about working with them, which I have for the last year or so, we're rolling it out to our teams, they're just going to get better. So really great programmers can just get better. But the other thing I'm focused on, this is just like my own personal passion project, I'm starting to work on figuring out how we take all these tools and teach people who don't know how to program. And I think we're going to see a whole new army of developers show up because these tools are going to make it much, much easier. All right? Shockingly easier. I think most of you know that. Okay. We talked about this. We talked about CI/CD. I know I'm going to belabor this, but like I'm going to reuse this metaphor of a dirt road. A lot of software companies, they start and then like they don't think about CI/CD. And like this was one of Wade and I's wine conversations. You know, we were talking about, so our teams push to production 400 to 600 times a week. It turns out you get to design the road that your software gets to production on. And almost nobody in the startup ecosystem works on that in the early stages. I think that's stupid and I think that's wrong. My advice to Wade was take your best engineer that's passionate about this and park them on it full time because you'll get a compounding effect. Okay, you get a compounding effect. And so we built a couple of these things it turns out that if you really focus in on these things, you can actually really speed up the speed of innovation over time, and you can solve a lot of regulatory and compliance problems. You can actually make a white glove developer experience, you know, in your company that's pretty amazing. I want to get to one more thing because this is really the last thing. We're going to get new programming languages. We're going to get new computers. And the thing I'm probably most excited about is what's happening in RISC-V. How many of you all tracking this? Okay, you should dig into it. Like TensTorrent is this cool company started by his CEO is Jim Keller, like I mentioned earlier. But the last thing I want to end with is this really amazing platform called Mojo. So Mojo is a superset of Python. And back to thinking in bets, this is a pretty good bet. This SDK just got released to early adopters. It's a superset of Python, and it can be up to 35,000 times faster than Python, and it's a full stack programming language along with a compiler and interpreter. It's really phenomenal. There's nothing like it that exists, and like this is one of the big bets that I'm personally going to make for myself, and then we're going to be making it inside Jack Henry. It's a phenomenal platform, and you can then take like compiled Mojo and target any computer architecture with modular. And I'll let you all like dig around and look it up. But I just want to leave you with the fact that we're going to get new tools. A lot of things are going to change, and some of you have made bets, and you're going to have to change those bets if you want to win, because we are. So if a legacy company like us, if we can go in and overhaul and change things and shift and make different bets, then you all should be able to do that too. So with that, I'm done. Thank you so much. Thank you, Wade. Thank you, everybody.